we've had just about everything today. We had driving out in the dark. It was clear-ish. Saw the big full moon. Real bright. Holy cow. And drove for like over 40 minutes to go steelhead fishing, thinking the river's probably down enough. And then as soon as we get up and over the hill to where we want to drop down to the river, it's a full-on tsunami. That kind of sucked. So we went to, drove down where we could see part of the river, and sure enough, it's flooding way too much still, unfortunately. So went to another spot on the river, tried a couple of casts, but whatever. Then ran into a buddy, had a little chit-chat. Then tried to go up to another spot you used to be able to drive to, and I guess the road got washed out, so that put an end to that. So then we decided we were going to go look for some elk, Ruby and I. And that's why we're here. I can see around for quite a ways, some clear cuts and stuff, but there's just no elk moving around or standing up anywhere. Then I tried to fly the drone up, see if I could spot some elk in the Christmas trees, and Ruby went frickin' apeshit. Like she's convinced the drone is the devil itself. Like she was going absolutely crazy. So, here we are. I saw that cool, hopefully the video just turned out good, cool looking video of the hawk that I just saw. And now all that's left is to go home, so you know the routine from here, right? And then on the way back from the river, we're about halfway home now, then it started snowing. Basically had a little slice of everything. Now, if you're further curious, I am right where my friend from the small community out on the coast recorded those crazy lights above her car in the darkness. Right there, same place. Alright, here we go. Hello, Steve. You can use my name, it won't matter. The title of this email is My Story. By me being honest about what happened to me, I've already lost many friends and family members. What? As if I got up one morning and said to myself, I think I'm going to make up a whopper of a story about a Sasquatch to see how many family members and friends I can get rid of. Not. Yeah, right? When I was around 6 or 7 years old, we were headed up the mountain to my grandparents' cabin in Red Feather Lakes, Colorado. I remember we were going around a bend in the road and my grandfather hit something that looked like a man. It was very tall, dark, and full of hair. I remember that it hit the hood of the station wagon with its large hand. I was so young that I didn't think to look at the hood of the car the next morning to see if there was a dent. My great-grandmother, Mimi, was sitting next to me. And she said, Earl, my grandfather's name, aren't you going to stop and make sure that whatever you hit is all right? Either all right or is dead? And I remember hearing him say, I've heard and read a lot about these things and I'm not stopping. And it's for sure I'm not getting out of this car at night with that thing. So he kept driving. I've often wondered what it was that he hit that night and on that old dark dusty road. And now that I'm older and I've had an encounter of my own, I know in my heart for sure just what it was that he did hit on that old dark dusty road so many years ago. I've also wondered if the Sasquatch can follow a person by that person's smell, or do they somehow tag you so they can keep up with you? I'm asking this because years later I was living in the middle of a town, Kentwood, Michigan, in a mobile home park. I'll have to send you photos of the area in another email. I wasn't thinking about them until now, and I don't know how to pull them up now that I've started on the email. I don't have photos of the two Sasquatch, just my yard, so maybe they aren't worth sending. I guess the one photo would be able to let you know how very close I was to these beings. Not far enough away, that's for sure. Ooh. Anyway, we had a creek and lots of trees that lined the creek. Good places for Bigfoot to hide in and behind. But since we didn't know that they were lurking about, we didn't ever give it any thoughts to ever look for them. And I was sitting outside, talking on the phone with one of my friends. She was a talker, so I was sitting there listening to her talk. And all of a sudden, this thing, at first I thought it was a stray dog, It had long blonde hair like an Irish setter, only with blonde hair. It was down on all fours, and I heard talking, and the voice said, "Can I go see what's put out today to eat?" And then I heard another voice say, "I guess you can, but be careful." Wow. Is it raining? We might get rained out here. We had a slab of cement out back that I think someone had poured for their picnic table. And I used to toss out popcorn and any leftover food we had for the wild critters that always came. We had ducks, wild turkey, muskrats, skunks, groundhogs, all kinds of wildlife. And this thing, I thought it was a dog at first, got up next to the ducks that were eating, and it started eating as well. It sounded like a pig snorting and munching on the scraps that I had tossed out there. And all of a sudden it must have heard me talking to my friend on the phone, so it turned its head and looked right at me. Its face was almost black. Its nose looked kind of big, yet pushed in somewhat. Its hands were dark like its face, but it had blonde hair that moved side to side when the wind hit it. It looked as if someone had just brushed its hair. It was really pretty. When it saw me, it stopped chewing and grunted, and all of a sudden it stood up. I'm only 4'8", and it was a lot taller than me. I said, "Oh my God, Gail, you're not going to believe me, but there are 2 Sasquatch in my backyard. I gotta let you go." She hung up. And at first I had not seen the adult one, just the younger one that had come down to graze. Once it stood up and started walking up the hill in our backyard, when it got up alongside of the fence, it dropped down on all fours again and took off. It moved so quick, like a road runner, and it was gone. The adult was standing over by my husband's shed, and the top of the shed, the peak, Sorry, I lost my spot. Some weird alert came up on the screen and screwed me. The adult was standing over by my husband's shed. The top of the shed, the peak, was 8 feet tall, and this adult had its head over the top and was looking over it. So it had to be at least 10 feet tall. All of a sudden, I felt like I was in Disney World. My mind was saying these things aren't real. Then I remember thinking, are these things demons or angels or Sasquatch? It was like my mind felt like I was floating or something of that nature. Utopia. Then I felt like I was going to black out. And all of a sudden I started to cry and shake, and I could not control either one, and my legs felt like I wasn't going to be able to stand up for much longer. I told myself, you better take off and run into the house and lock the doors. As if that would have done any good. If they wanted in, they would have gotten in however they wanted to. Several hours later, my husband came home, and I was still crying and shaking out of control. He grabbed my shoulders and said, "Adele, what's wrong? What has happened to you?" I've never been much of a crier, so he knew something awful had happened. In between sobs, I told him what had happened. I was afraid to tell him because I didn't think he'd believe me. I'd just been through a lot health-wise. The doctor just told us that I had multiple sclerosis. Okay, hold on, I'm going to finish this with the camera in the truck because this isn't a waterproof camera and it's too expensive to get ruined. Give me a second. I'm definitely going to get rained or snowed out or both here, but I think I could finish this. The next day, he couldn't get me to go outside at all. I just sat and shook. He went down to get the mail. We lived in a trailer park. And while he was gone, I heard Betty, our next-door neighbor, scream like someone was killing her. So somehow I got my courage up and I took off out the door running towards her screams. When I found her, she was laying face down in the dirt behind her house. I took her arm gently and tried to roll her over, and she started screaming at me. Her eyes were all glazed over like she couldn't see me, and she yelled at me as blood trickled down her face. "I told you to leave me alone and let me go." I said, "Betty, this is Adele, your neighbor. Who are you talking to, and who did this to you?" She yelled, "You leave me alone." And I said, "I'm here to help you." She said, "If I wanted your help, I would have asked you for your help. Now go away and leave me alone." So I turned around and ran as quickly as I could so I could get back into my house, shaking out of control yet again. Or should I say, still. I was worried about her, She had such a big gash on her forehead, she needed stitches by the time I left her. Her shirt was soaked in blood. By then my husband got back home and I told him what happened. I thought that a Sasquatch had did it to her. She was in her 70s. She and her husband have lived in that house and park for over 20 years. After I found her laying like that, they sold their house and were moved out within a month. She wouldn't ever talk to me about what happened that day, but I know in my heart that Sasquatch had hurt her somehow. We didn't stay there much longer as our trailer got black mold in it and we had to move. We moved almost 30 miles away, and they followed me. It's like I've been tagged. You may ask, how do I know? My husband came into the house the first winter that we had been in our new place and said, "Adele, they followed you out here." I went pale. And I said, "How do you know?" He said, "There are footprints in the snow." He said they're distorted because the sun is melting, but you can see their toes. So I got my camera and I took photos of them. I still have the photos and you can see their toes, but they are really distorted. I didn't know that they were out there, or I would have gone out and took photos of them before the sun had melted them so badly. It's been years ago now. 15, going on 16 years. I'm not sure if they're still watching me or not, or if I'm still tagged, but we're fixing to move out of this trailer park. There's some really bad things going on here, so I'm wondering if, when we do move, if they'll follow me yet again. And so far, they've not hurt me, not on the outside anyway, but they've crushed my spirit. It only takes one time to do some real damage to us humans. Well, Steve, I guess I'll let you go. It's 3:25 a.m. and I have to get up early to take care of my friend. Thank you for having a place where I can share what has taken place in our lives. It's not easy living with it all bottled up inside. I'm grateful that you're there and that you have this place where we know that those that hear what has happened to us won't mock us and put us down. Or better yet, just walk away shaking their heads saying you need to seek out some mental help. When really all I've shared has really happened, so they're the ones who need that help. I wish President Trump would tell us the truth, even though we already know the truth. I just want everyone else to know it as well. Thank you, take care of everyone that you love, and I'll be watching. Adele Hayes, West Michigan. Wow, Adele, there you go. And here's another email with photos. Oh, okay, cool. Steve, I told you that I'd send some photos of the backyard where the two Sasquatch showed up. In the second photo, you can see the arm of the chair where I was sitting. It's right above the X. And the blonde youth Sasquatch was eating down on all fours by the bird bath. So I wasn't that far away from him. I'm guessing that it was a male because they didn't see anything on its chest to let me think otherwise. If you get these photos before you get my other email, its title is My Story. It starts off, "Hello Steve, you can use my name, it won't matter, Adele Hayes." Anyhow, now that I've started this one, I just remembered that I didn't snag the photos of the footprints in the snow. They were pretty much melted away by the time we found them. And okay, I was able to add them. The second photo shows how far apart the steps were, and the little prints are mine. The first print in the second row is one of theirs. Like I said, it was pretty much melted away before we found them, and they just stopped as they got around the back side of the house. I have more photos in the snow, but it only brought up these two. Not sure why. My question is, why would they want to follow a person anyway? From the time I was 6 or 7 years old in the Colorado mountains, and then years later in Kentwood, Michigan, and now following out where I'm at in Ottawa County in Michigan. Then once we moved within the next few months, are they going to follow me yet again? And if so, why? I don't understand why they'd want to follow me around. I'm an old woman now. I'll be 68 on March 23rd, 2025, so what's the point? It's not like they're talking to me. What's it going to gain them by following me around? I know that y'all don't know any more than I do, but it's puzzling as to why they'd even want to follow me, and it's scary. Take care of my friend Adele Hayes, West Michigan. There's the photos of the yard, the bird bath. Footprints. Straight line footprints, big ones. There you go, Adele. Appreciate you sending your email here. You know you're in a safe place here, right? Obviously. And It's really odd. The blonde or lighter hair mentioned, comboed up with the almost black skin, or sometimes black skin, has been mentioned a lot of times. All right, a lot of people have seen that exact same description that you described. Man, it's like the lights are going out, isn't it? But I suggest you say out loud wherever you are for them to leave you alone. I command them to leave you alone. Just tell them, I know you're there. You know I'm here. Just leave me alone. Right? If you've been watching this channel, you see where I go by myself a lot of times. For the most part, I don't have anything bad happening to me. I'm sure I'm glad you found this channel. Appreciate you sending that email in. I hope this helped hearing it read out as well, alright? I think there's a small blizzard coming. I kind of like being out here. I don't want to do this in the shop. See if I can get, I don't know how bad it's going to get here. I'll see if there's a short one next. Adele, I hope you're still here, and make sure you keep following. If anything else happens, you want to share it, you know what to do, alright? Share away. Ooh, this is a real long one. Phones, the snow stuff is kind of bouncing off the screen, so this one's not too long. Let me try this one. Mark this as red. Then I'll probably get going. Finish it up at home. Shed hunting in Big Sky. Title of this email. Steve, I don't mind if you say my first name. God knows I've incurred a life of ridicule for telling my stories over the years. I shared one part of my life in the comment section of one of your videos sometime back. This time I want to tell one real occurrence from 1988 while living in Bozeman with my first wife before we were married. Julie and I had made it through our first season at Big Sky Resort and had moved off the mountain back into Bozeman for work. I was working multiple part-time jobs. The music store in town, repairing instruments, the used car dealer just off the corner of Villard Street, fixing cars and trucks, and back up the canyon road skinning logs for the cabin builder on the river there. A native couple had become close to us in the time we'd been on the resort and had helped us get into the groove of flip-flopping jobs to get the rent wolf at bay. As spring got into warming up, I found myself needing a couple $100, more than we had. I'd shared our dilemma with my native friend. I won't use their names out of respect for them. And he told me that we could make up that cash by pulling a shed run. So I agreed to the task. It required hiking up into the higher elevation to find where elk had gotten trapped in the snow and expired. All we had to do was find dead elk and harvest their racks, load our packed frames, and hike back out. Simple, right? At least I had figured it would be. It sounded simple enough. My friend neglected to inform me of a few details until we were a bit more committed. I showed up on the appointed day in the 2-track going back into what he called the Woodlot Road. We shouldered up and headed southwest into the backcountry from the Conoco, caps lock, C-O-N-O-C-O, at the bottom of the resort road. And after a solid 3 miles up and down and around, we started finding expired animals in various places. No shit, crazy. He explained how I should work around to the right from there, and he would go left. We would then meet up back at the vehicles. Then my friend let me know that, number 1, we were in prime grizzly turf, and 2, it was apparently a crime of sorts, so don't get caught by DNR. Now, I'm sure most people have no clue how taxing it is to have just one good 6x6 lashed to your back while hiking a 6 to 8 kilometer elevation, leave alone 2 other full racks, the trees, the brush, and everything else that can seem to grab a hold of it, and you in the process. With 3 perfect racks lashed on, I broke off to head back to the vehicles, making my way out to heavier cover and skirting along the bottoms until I was just a mile or so from being at the starting point. I had one big knob to get over, and then I would be all downhill from there. I tacked left and then right on a 30-45 degree angles, working my way up to that last saddle peak. I was soaked in sweat, legs quivering with every labored short step. And upon reaching the top, I found a good-sized jack pine to lean back against while I caught my breath. It was about then I noticed a big bear on the adjoining peak probably half a mile away. I guess so. If it's that common to find dead shit, there's gonna be grizzlies all over the place. The wind was in his favor, and I was nearly spent. I watched as the bear picked up the scent of dead flesh that I'd tied to my pack frame, and he dropped him standing with his nose in the air to a full gallop down that saddle peak. I watched and counted seconds as he covered that first quarter mile downhill, and in less than a minute, I'd suddenly come to the conclusion that I was going to be bear scat in a few days. I had no chance of killing it, with only a buck 501 knife and a number 2 hatchet. I watched in awe as it started up my saddle peak, not losing any speed. And at about 150 yards downhill, it broke stride and stood on its hind legs again, winding. I was 28. Very crazy then. I hit the quick release on my pack, I pulled my 501 and the hatchet and prepared to fight to my death. And in my mind, I called out to God to help me and stood my ground, legs shaking, my heart hammering in my ears. The huge bear dropped to all 4 feet and began swaying and swinging left to right. And at this point, I was sure it would be over quickly, and my stomach churned. The water and jerky I had snacked on into a foul moment down my leg. As I stood there ready to die in mortal combat, the smell that had attracted this beast had changed, and now seemed to be unappealing because seconds after the involuntary combat dump, the bear turned and walked away and began angling downhill at a walk. I stood for another minute or so before my knees gave out completely and I passed out. And when I came to my senses, there was still light in the sky, and I quickly got my frame snapped on and got busy with the last mile of my hike back. My friend was sitting on the hood of his Toyota pickup as I came down the trail. "Dude, what's up? Where you been?" I dumped my gear and retreated to the river to wash up and wash out, telling him of my episode. He listened without laughing or ridicule, and as I finished the story, he tilted his head and said something in native I didn't understand. I believe he was thanking the Sabe and the Creator. I've never gone unarmed into the bush like that again. I got the rent paid. Alright, there we go. So it was a terrifying grizzly encounter you shared. That's fine. Those are good too, right? And you shit your pants. I've heard of people doing that. I've never done that myself. People piss themselves, throw up, shit themselves. It's nasty out here now. Crazy that those bulls would all get stuck in the same place and bite it like that. But that is definitely a buffet for a spring grizzly, right? Anyway, there we go. Different flavor of email for everyone to hear. Experience in the outdoors, right? Alright, it's definitely too snarky out here. I'm going to start heading home. Unless I find a place that stops snowing and raining. With a cool sight to see. Maybe I'll stop on the way home, maybe not. Either way, I'll finish this up shortly. Hey, Bubs. And just like that, Shazam! Back in the man cave. It's all been heated up in here. It's warm, so it's going to make me feel a little sleepy. But I'm going to get more voices heard. Pouring rain outside. Couldn't stop and find a viewpoint anywhere on the way back. There. That ought to work. Now, this next one's titled, Long Time Listener, First Time Share. Feel free to share. The space you have created is the space you have created is greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing the word Sabe with all of us. It feels so much more real than Bigfoot, or even the eloquent yet often used Sasquatch. If this is the true name for the forest people, I hope I can do them an honor by using it. It's actually a name from the Ojibwe. I also want to thank the brave people who shared their truths before me. You've given me courage to jump right in. Now I will get to the point. I have had many Sabe experiences through my life. And so I guess it's appropriate to share the first one since we are all capable of handling the truth here. So here it goes. My first memory. Back in the early 70s, it was not uncommon for our mothers and fathers to let us roam free in the fields, within reasonable earshot from the house, and forest adventures were allowed. Those who grew up in my era know what kind of freedom I'm talking about. Pack a PB&J and leave for the day. Hard to find that these days. And most parents do not allow their children jackknives for Christmas anymore. But I was one of those lucky kids allowed to bleed a little and wouldn't change a thing. When I was about 5 years old, I was wandering in the forest and I met a new, quote, friend, end quote. My friend didn't talk. Kept just behind my left shoulder and liked to swing from wild grapevines hanging from the trees. Even though we were the same size, he was much more capable of climbing, running, jumping. Just about everything I could do, he could do 10 times better and faster. Did I mention that he was covered with brown fur except for his face? I saw that his furry mother was close by, but she was huge and imposing, so I tried not to look right at her. She averted her eyes from looking directly at me and remained still as a statue. I found small figures woven from the grapevines. Did she make them for us to use as toys? I also thought they were neat and tried to make my own. I tried the magnificent moves that my new friend was doing, as kids do, so I also climbed and tried to swing from tree to tree. Epic fail, but fun. After some time of trying to copy him and failing, I felt it was time to go home. And upon leaving my new friend, threw a large stick at my... Upon leaving my new friend, threw a large stick at my back as I was walking away, and it hurt. I started to cry and said I didn't want to play with him anymore because he was mean. I ran home, which was not very far away, about 100 yards. When I got home, my brother was waiting on the front porch, furious at me. He just found a snake that was tied into a knot and left on the front doormat. He blamed me for it and was very distressed that I would hurt an innocent snake. No matter how I protested, he would not believe that it was not me. I felt terrible for the snake, but somehow felt that my new friend had left it there for me as some type of a token. Perhaps Owlman will know what it means. My mother, oblivious to all this, called me upstairs for a haircut. She handed me a book to keep me busy while she trimmed my hair, and the new book was called Curious George. I said with glee, it's my new friend that I was playing with in the woods. I could not believe that someone had written a book about him. I showed the picture book to my mom and said that the artist had it wrong, as my friend did not have a tail. My mother laughed and said that I must have an imaginary friend. She then told me that my new friend was not real. I told her that he threw a stick at my back and that it looked real enough. I had growing bruises on my back where the branches struck me. I was then told never to go in the woods to play with mean kids again. And I cried. My fantastic day had gone completely downhill. First, the stick hits me. Then I got blamed for the snake, and now I'm not allowed in the woods to play with a kid that's not even real. I saw my friend one more time at my bedroom window, second floor, and I cried when I saw him. I could tell that he was sad about hitting me with the big stick. Don't ask how I knew. I just did. I told him I was not allowed to play with him anymore, and besides, he wasn't even real. The mind of a kid, right? I wonder what my mother would have thought if she knew the truth of what had actually happened out in the woods that day. I'll bet she would have lost it. It would be a few years before I had more experiences, and the Sabe are real, all right. I also sit in the Club of No Return. I hope this helps some more of you lifers out there to share more details. Thank you. My name is Chris. Chris, we're ready for the rest. Anytime you are, we're ready to hear the rest. Sounds like a very, very interesting slice of life you have experienced. Wow. Send away whenever you're ready, if you would. Holy cow! Ooh. I think I woke up at 3:30 and I haven't been to sleep since. What is it, noon now or something? Next email is titled Tree Knocks. Hey Steve, hope this email finds you in good health and spirits. I've been a fan of your channel since forever. I found it when I was looking for hunting videos. And then I saw the video where you told the story about your encounter and your grandfather's encounter. I've been an avid fan. Ever since I saw the Patterson Gimlin video, I felt that it was highly possible that these forest people did exist. I've been an avid hunter since I was 12 years old. I've sent several emails to you, but only one has been read online. A couple I suggested that you read on your Rumble channel because they didn't relate to the Sabe people. If you find them, feel free to share them here if you want. I know that these people exist because I saw one while turkey hunting. It walked across a small clearing in front of me, about 30 to 40 yards away. It walked from one tree line to the other. When it reached the edge of the woods, it stopped and turned, facing back the way it had come, and stood there for 2 or 3 minutes. I think that it was a juvenile. It was over 6 feet tall, covered in black hair. It looked more apish than human. No hair in its face, chest, or abdomen. Its skin was a light tan color, like the color used in desert camo. Its head was round like a human's, and it had small ears. And after a couple of minutes, it turned and walked into the woods again, and never made a sound as it left. I was absolutely dumbfounded. It was like, holy shit, what the F did I just see? Am I dreaming, hallucinating, or was that really real? I knew that no one in the hunting club would believe me, so I just kept my mouth shut about it. A few weeks prior to this, I think that a really big one came up behind me. I was sitting in front of a big boulder that completely concealed me from behind, and was calling to a gobbler that I had heard at first light before fly down, and I felt the ground shake a little. At first I just thought maybe it was a ground tremor, but then it happened again, and then again. And then I thought that it was too regular just to be a tremor. It had a rhythm like it was someone walking. And as I was thinking this, something stepped on a stick that made a loud crack behind me. I almost shit myself, and all the hair on my body stood up. I was too scared to turn around and look to see what had stepped on that stick. I sat there for a while before I finally gave me the courage to turn around and look. And when I did, nothing was there. Anyway, back to the subject of tree knocks. Here's a question for you. How do they make a tree knock? Do they carry around a tree limb or a small tree with them to make a tree knock? If so, why don't we see them with it in any of the videos of them that have been taken? I don't think that it would be just a random piece of wood laying on the ground, because any wood laying on the ground isn't stout enough to make a solid hit on a tree. Most wood laying on the ground is rotted or decayed enough to not be a suitable choice to make a good solid tree knock. I usually wake up pretty early, so while I was staying at my girlfriend's house, I got up and made coffee, then went outside to have a smoke while the coffee was brewing. While I was standing there, I heard a tree knock about 150 yards away. About 2 seconds later, I heard another one from a different direction. And as I was standing there, I kind of laughed and said out loud, "Okay, I know that you're all here. If you know that I'm here, and you know that I'm here, so just leave us alone and I'll leave you alone." And so far, there hasn't been any other activity. Oh, perfect. Sorry this became such a long email, but it feels good to share with you and your listeners. Thanks for all you do for the thousands of people that have had their whole lives changed in the blink of an eye and didn't ask for it. Blessings and peace be with you and yours. You can say my name sincerely, Stephen Rains. Stephen, welcome to the club, and I appreciate you, man. Big time appreciate that generous act of donating time of your life to write an email to share with us. Thank you. Sounds like my neighbor's back. Holy, this is a long one. All right, I'm going to go in. One more. Experiencer, Discovery, Live Your Truth, UFOs, and Sasquatch is the title of this email. Here we go. Please withhold my name. Professional reasons. First, let me introduce myself to you and your audience. I'm currently 7 years old, married with kids and grandkids. My wife and I live in the state of Georgia. We are still both very active, athletic, and in very good physical condition for our ages. I still work out with weights multiple times a week, which I've done most of my adult life. The purpose of me telling you this is because I don't want anyone mistakenly getting the impression I'm some typical geriatric who has some form of dementia and telling the story. Even though I could have retired years ago, I'm still actively working, doing consulting in the nuclear industry. For obvious reasons, you have to be FFD, fit for duty, to work in that industry, particularly when it comes to your mental acuity. All right, gotcha, loud and clear. Think still recording? Yep. My story begins at a very young age. I grew up in a very rural area in the Northeast. My dad was an avid outdoorsman and taught myself and my 4 siblings to hunt and fish from the time we could shoulder a gun around the ages of 6 and 7. We're very fortunate in that we had a lot of freedom in the outdoors. Even though we didn't have a lot of money, my dad was a blue-collar worker. There was never anything we wanted for. He provided a great home and environment to grow up in regardless. I always had an affinity for nature and the outdoors as far back as I can remember. I recall being missing in my parents' eyes for the better part of a day when I was about 4 years of age because I went off exploring in the woods and playing in a beautiful native brook trout stream across the street in a neighbor's property. I always loved to camp out in early elementary school. My parents were always cool with this and supported me. During the summer months when we were out of school, I would camp out in the fields or woods behind my house, nights on end, typically by myself because my friends' parents weren't as willing to give them the same independence. I never had any fear of anything back then, and at the time, southern New England didn't have any of the predators it does today, like black bears, cougars, and coyotes. They have made an incredible comeback in that area. Now to get to my experiences and why I'm writing. I've had no less than 3 legitimate UFO encounters in my life. The first was when I was about 10 years old after an early spring Little League baseball practice. I observed an oval plasma, not metallic, a like object within a couple hundred yards of me, only a couple hundred feet at most above the treetops. There was no sound. As it moved off, it let a distinct disturbance in the clear night, air before dusk. This was not exhaust or contrail. This was the start of a paradigm shift in my life. I knew what I saw then and now. Even as a child, you could have drilled my teeth without Novocaine to get me to change my story of what I witnessed, and I wouldn't. I even got stopped by an evil run-in, 4th grader. I even got slapped by an evil nun in 4th grade for having the audacity to suggest we weren't alone in the universe. Yeah, I'm starting to put the pieces together. The nuns weren't quite that cool back in the day, and probably even today, who knows. My second experience and most profound was approximately 2 decades later when I was about 30 years old. I was living outside the Boston area with a girlfriend, and I needed to get away for the weekend. I decided to drive a couple hours away to northwest Connecticut and camp at a state park, which I had never been to before. Being my nature, I decided I didn't want to set up my tent in a designated campsite near others, but chose a clandestine site instead to pitch it at the edge of a high mountain meadow away from the others so I would have a better view of the night sky out from underneath the canopy of the trees. And sometime around probably 10 o'clock, I was relaxing in my camp chair with a strong campfire behind me. As I observed the stars, planets, passing airplanes, and satellites, my gaze was drawn to a slow-moving, large orb-like object just over the treetops on the adjacent ridge coming in my direction. Once again, there was no sound, and as it approached within less than a quarter mile from me, I was becoming more enamored as to what it could possibly be. My next conscious memory was me waking up inside my tent on top of my sleeping bag, oriented with my head half in and half out of my tent. Mind you, I never ever sleep in a tent in that orientation. I go in head first with my feet toward the opening. I have no recollection of how I got there or getting up from my camp chair and heading for that tent. I immediately recognized that my fire was all but out, nothing more than slightly burning coals. It was early hours of the morning. Yes, folks, I had a missing time event. What was even more bizarre was the next morning, and For approximately the following 5 days, I felt a presence that enveloped me, which I couldn't shake. It was the most euphoric feeling I've ever experienced in my life to this day. And in case your audience is wondering, I wasn't doing any drugs or consuming alcohol at the time. The answer is a resounding no. On around the 5th day, I could feel this spirit start to dissipate and move away. I then had a very emotional experience because I knew it was leaving for good and begged it please not go. Interesting. The third UFO encounter took place about a year ago and was a visual sighting, but nonetheless insignificant, but witnessed by numerous others in the same area. I've had reoccurring dreams about UFOs my entire life that center around my childhood, that takes place in a field behind our house. In the dream, I see a large metallic object hovering over my head below the height of the trees surrounding the meadow. My next younger brother is with me in the dream. What does any of this have to do with the Sasquatch experience? Nothing up until the past 5 years, or possibly longer. And this is the real reason I chose to share my truths here. And just to further qualify what and who I am, as previously stated, I've exercised and worked out my entire life and practiced numerous martial arts. In addition, my experience with firearms and weapons goes back to my childhood. I am a card-carrying member of the Carry Concealed Weapons Club, and have been formally trained in combat handgun tactics by a very highly recognized federal law enforcement training instructor and friend who is a legend among his peers. And needless to say, I've never had any fear of anything or anybody in everyday life. And please don't confuse this with me wanting to make people think I was/am some kind of a badass. Anything could be further from the truth. The reason behind me telling this has to do with several more recent experiences over the past 5 years or so, and in addition to another encounter in my early to mid-40s. At that point, I was in the best shape of my adult life. I was working out 5 to 6 days a week and weighed a solid 245 pounds at 6'1" and was very proactive in martial arts. One night I was visiting and staying at my childhood home. My parents were away with friends. I had flown into town for an annual mayfly fishing trip with a good buddy. And on this particular night, I decided to go outside in the dark and walk into the back meadows to observe the night sky, as I had done so many times in my childhood. Walking down off the porch, I hadn't got more than 25 yards to the back edge of their yard when I was inexplicably overcome by the most ominous and dreadful feeling I've ever experienced. The hair on the back of my neck literally was standing on end, and every cell in my body was telling me I was about to be attacked by someone or something. I was so overcome by this feeling that I backed up to a 2-foot diameter oak tree for protection that stood at the edge of the yard about 5 feet away. I stood there for several minutes to let my night vision adjust and try and collect myself, surveying the yard between myself and the house. I then very quickly walked back to the house and locked myself in with the lights off. At the time, I told myself it must have been a black bear, possibly a mountain lion, that was watching me. But mind you, at the time, the state DNR was denying there were any mountain lions in the state of Connecticut. We now know differently. This brings me to a more recent experience in late December 2020, a couple days before the new year. I was in Arkansas duck hunting with my son-in-law and 2 grandsons, along with 2 other dads, each with their own 2 kids. We hunt a public 160,000-acre WMA with flooded timber. By law, you can't enter the WMA boundary before 4 a.m. And at that time, it's every duck hunter for himself to get to their holes in the flooded timber before someone else does. Our 3 boats proceeded to our chosen hole in the flooded timber, several miles in and away from others. And right after arriving at our spot and setting our decoy spreads under our headlamps, we moved to the boats and camouflaged them up with netting and even branches of duck brush, one of the dads cut with a machete. Then legal shooting light was now probably over, another hour away. And at this point, we had nothing to do but get comfortable and try and take a cat nap in the bottom of the duck boats and keep warm. And within a matter of minutes, within approximately 75 yards, judging by the sound, something very large started to smash logs and break large branches against the trees. Even at this relatively close distance, our headlamps couldn't penetrate through the buckbrush, oak, and cypress trees between us and where the sound was coming from. One of the dads mumbled, "What the F?" And I instantly replied, "Sasquatch," without considering the kids with us. I immediately wish I hadn't, but couldn't retract what I said, and no one said a word. The sound of smashing had lasted for probably 30 seconds, and then got dead quiet. And within possibly another minute, it started again and repeated what we heard the first time again for approximately 30 seconds. Just for the record, one of the dads from Kentucky in our group is a large human being weighing around 350 pounds, and not he or any one of the other adults could have collectively made noise as loudly if we had tried. The other curious thing was no sound of water splashing, which would have been the case, again, we were in flooded timber. As anyone knows who spends time on water, particularly when there is no wind, sound travels. You could otherwise hear whispers at that distance. It could not have been other duck hunters because they have had to pass us on the way in. What was even more strange was none of the other adults ever spoke about it back at camp, away from the kids. My last and most recent creepy experience was about a year ago. I planned to set out to camp at a remote small lake in North Georgia to trout fish. And aside from drift boats that I own, I have several small one-man rafts, one of which I used on this trip. After arriving, I loaded my camping gear and fishing equipment onto the raft and fished my way across this lake to the far side where I could see a finger of land extending out on the lake. This would make the perfect camping area, and in fact, I found a primitive fire ring someone else had constructed in the past. With a few hours of daylight left, I was prepared to set up and camp here. It seemed like the ideal spot. And once again, as I pulled my raft up on land and started to survey the surroundings, I was overcome by that same foreboding, ominous, fear-based feeling I had experienced years prior at my parents' home. And for the record, I was carrying a Glock 45, the model number, 9mm with a 22 round aftermarket clip. No matter, I decided I couldn't shake the feeling and rode my raft back across the lake, loaded up, and drove the 2.5 hours back home. Something did not want me there, and I accepted the feeling and respected them. How could this be? I spent my entire life camping, hunting, and fishing in remote wilderness places by myself from Maine to California and everywhere in between without any fear whatsoever. I've been charged by a 6x6 bull elk on Indian lands in Wyoming during the rut in October while fishing. I was crossing an alpine meadow just having just come up out of a riverbed heading back to my campsite. Another time in the canyon of the Snake River in Idaho, I had a cow moose with a calf charge and chased me back into the river. I've fished in other canyons like the Teton in Idaho, Ghost and Powder in Colorado, fishing with my back to the canyon walls for walls known for populations of mountain lions, as well as backcountry areas with prolific grizzly populations like Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks, without a care or fear of being there. At around age 9, I ran away from home with my pup tent, mess kit, fishing pole, and loaf of Wonder Bread. I hid in the woods for 3 full days and caught native brook trout and cooked them and ate them. My dad, who knew these woods intimately, along with my 2 older brothers, looked but couldn't find me. I only returned home when they convinced my best childhood friend to come and get me and tell me nothing would happen if I returned. His mom, that passed away at 96 a few years ago, chided me my entire adult life about that incident and how, like me and my best buddy, would not give up my location to the adults no matter how they threatened him. The point being, I had no fear of the woods, creatures in it, or being alone. When the hit show Alone came out, I scoffed at it and others like it. I was doing that shit at 8 years old and younger. Another earlier experience that comes up to mind, which I never questioned until recently, is the following account. When I was about 17 or 18, I was parking with a girlfriend doing what young lovers do. We were in a relatively remote area on the backside of a lake that was undeveloped. To get there, we drove a couple miles into the woods off a secondary road on what might have been a fire service road, which dead-ended into a small grassy area just big enough to pull a U-turn. And at one point I had to step out of my vehicle to relieve myself. And upon exiting the vehicle, I heard what sounded like a large bipedal person or animal running away from my car into the woods. Obviously, I had surprised whomever or whatever it was. Having no night vision at that moment because the car dome light had come on opening the door, I couldn't see to determine what it was. I was so caught off guard I jumped back into the vehicle and explained to the girl we had to get out of there immediately. At the time, I thought it had to be some creepy individual that lived in the local rural area that had nefarious intentions. Mind you, this would have been around 1972 or 73. Bigfoot certainly wasn't on my radar, especially being in the eastern U.S. I do forage for mushrooms and other edibles. The morel season is literally upon us here in Georgia as of this writing. And my approach now when I'm about to enter the woods is set on the expectations with the beings and respectfully ask for peaceful and safe passage. I do carry bear spray and a firearm. I let them know this is for protection from humans, cougars, potential sow with cubs. I would only use bear spray in that event, and the potential for aggressive wild boars, pigs. Were any of these experiences merely a trick of the mind? We all know better. These are my truths, and I live them. UFOs, Sasquatch, and paranormal events, embrace them and accept them. They are our reality. Steve, thanks again for what you do. I selectively chose your platform to share these experiences. There's only a couple other individuals very close to me I've ever shared these encounters with. Respectfully, Steve. Another Steve. Okay, my man. There you go. Read and shared. Note taken and locations. Man, I just found there's about, 20 unreads in a row here. Start on those tomorrow. And there you go. More voices heard. Oh, and I'm feeling a little nappy, I'll tell you what. Let's see who else gets knee-jerked into sharing after sitting on the fence for so long, right? We sure have had a lot of people. A lot of people have emailed in here with their experiences and having never told anyone ever before. And then finally this channel and all of you helped give them the courage to do so, right? That's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm going to get ripping. I'm not so chatty right now. I'm feeling kind of couchy. But was it Friday tomorrow? I'll definitely be back tomorrow. And we'll see. There might be somebody with me tomorrow. We'll see tomorrow. Share my story at howtohunt.com. All right? Get it out there. Get it shared. Get it out there. All right? Don't sit on it anymore. Get it shared. Be back tomorrow.
You ready? Guys could find one. Come on. This way, this way, this way, this way. Let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on. This way, this way, this way, this way. No, all right. This way. Good girl. Ooh, that's a lot of water. Holy shit. There's a lot of water, hey Bubs? Hey? Look at that. Too much. But we'll give it a go anyway, won't we? Wow.